So next up, I want to talk a little bit about editing software. So I am in my kitchen. There's going to be a little bit of an echo, and I'm going to talk about that and how to get rid of that other than just having a different location. I'm currently using my Yeti, and it's plugged into my laptop here via the USB. And for this, I can position it in a way where it's not directly in front of me. Because you don't want to record something that you are looking at like this because, well, that just looks weird. So we're going to go ahead and just put that off to the side, but the Yeti is awesome, and I can just crop that out in what we call post-production. So I'm currently in Camtasia. I want to take a look at one of the videos that we had as part of our production set. So I've already taken and downloaded it onto my desktop. Now, if you have an SD card, then you can use something like this, which is just goes into the USB, and then the SD is going to go into the slot. Then you can just transfer it to your desktop, or some computers and printers will have an SD card slot to read it. That's usually the easiest way. You can do it from your camera with the cord that usually comes with it, but I find that really, really cumbersome. So I would just get an SD card reader. They're really cheap, and that's the best way that I use for workflow. So I already have one of my videos here. This is going to be the raw version. I've done nothing to it. There's me checking the, the shot before I'm going to get started with it. And so for this, I'm going to be using Camtasia. With film editing software, the big ones, like really baseline, would be iMovie for Mac, but that's only going to be for Mac. Camtasia, which a lot of academics use. A lot of filmmakers hate Camtasia, but I think it's wonderful for what we're doing to create content for courses. And if you're trying to make a big Hollywood blockbuster, then Camtasia is terrible, but that's not what we're trying to do here. So the really big, robust one would be Final Cut Pro. But for me, Final Cut Pro is just, it's too many buttons. I can't deal with it. And it's just too much of a learning curve for me. So with Camtasia, you're giving up some control, actually a lot of control in what you can manipulate in post-production. But for what I do, I mean, I don't want all those buttons because I don't have time to learn Final Cut Pro. I will never be a filmmaker. That's, I don't want to be a filmmaker, and I just want to be able to create quality content for my students. So for me, I don't need that level of difficulty in the post-production editing software. So I'm going to show you Camtasia. Camtasia is available for Mac and PC, so it's available for everybody. And there is a tiny bit of learning curve, as with anything, but I think it's really simple. I'm not going to really do a ton of tutorials. I'm just going to show you a workflow in Camtasia because there are a ton of different Camtasia tutorials. So we have my video here. I'm going to pull it just into the space here. Let that take a second. Camtasia is going to have a timeline, and most film editing software is based upon the user interface of thinking like film when we would record on physical film. So if that kind of helps you think about it. So I'm just going to pull this down here into my timeline. And this black part is going to be the canvas. My particular camera was set to shoot in this size, but if I want to change the canvas, I just right click, go to adjust canvas, and then I can either make it custom, I can make it HD, 720. This is really going to depend on how I want it to look in the final product. So let's go ahead and just do HD, apply, oops. Adjust canvas. Okay, there we go. Also within Camtasia, I can make this larger. So if I want to completely fill the canvas, great. That's going to allow me to have the HD. And let's go ahead and just move that to the side. All right, so here's everything. You're going to see both the blue part is going to be the video, and you'll also be able to see the audio. And if you want, you can separate them. It really depends on what you want to do with it. So if we separate the audio video, we have our waveform here, and then we have only our video here. If you're just doing a quick edit like we're going to do now, there's really no need to separate them. It just makes it like an extra step. So it really depends on what you want to do. So I'm just going to click undo. Now they're back together. As you can see, these little waveforms is going to be the sound that we're making. So I know that in the beginning I can just cut all that off because I wasn't making any sound, and that's because I was recording while I was setting it up. Then I'm going to take that, slide it over to the left. Right. Here is going to be how magnified you want to see into the film. If you want to be kind of like a bird's eye view, then you scroll it to the left. This is going to be the entire 10-minute video. If you want to get deeper into kind of like a micro level to be able to see what's going on, that's when you slide it to the right. And then to play, let's see how that volume's doing. All right, so I can see that I started talking right here. So I want to be able to cut right around here because you don't really need the intake of breath that we usually start with before we start talking. So I can just go ahead and drag this to the right. And then I'm going to slide that back over to the playhead. And then, so I think that maybe it was a little too tight. So I'm just going to go ahead and undo that. And one more time. And I'll probably make it a little bit of inhale. So this is really, kind of trial and error. Some of it is going to be really intuitive. You're going to know when it feels or looks or sounds weird, and just kind of play around with it. So that's okay for me, right? I feel like that's pretty solid. Now I need to cut off the back end. Really depends on how much you're editing. For me, I try to do everything in one take. If you are like having an in there or a couple of stutters or a couple of like reflective pauses, that's okay. Just leave that in. I think that for what we do in teaching students, they're not expecting it to be a Hollywood level Marvel movie. They're expecting it to be a real human, a teacher maybe a thought leader or a coach creating digital content for them. And we want it to be polished. We want it to be good, but it's okay if it's human. So like for me, just in terms of the ease of my post-production, I try to minimize how much I need to cut together things, because when you start having cuts and, like manipulating things, that's when you're going to get into more of the complicated post-production stuff. So for me, if I can do it in one take, that's kind of ideal for me. So I'm just going to go to the back end and I'm going to cut off the tail. All right, so let me go ahead and move this over a little bit. So here's our little tail at the back end. And I'm going to go ahead and play this. Let's see where it stops. And it's going to be good to note that when you are recording, you want to leave yourself kind of a pause. So I'm going to play that just so you see and it feels awkward, but you're going to cut it off. So here I am talking. A lot better lighting than this, as well as the video on audio, which will have better audio than this. So you'll notice I kind of like just sit there for a minute, like smiling at the camera awkwardly. And that's going to help you in post-production, because if you just cut it off and then cut the camera from recording, then it can be kind of a pain to get a nice smooth transition at the end. So I'm going to make this a little bit larger so we can see. And you can see the waveforms here. This is where I stopped talking. So I'm going to cut it right there. I don't need that extra little tail. I can just cut that off. So I'm going to choose between split selected at playhead, split all at playhead. It doesn't really matter for what we're doing here. So we'll just say split selected. That makes this little kind of other piece. I can move that around. You can put it on different timelines if you want to get fancy. Again, if you like Camtasia, there's tons of other tutorials that can help you do lots of fancy stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that because we don't need it. I'm going to go back to the start and all right, so let's play it. I'm going to listen for the audio, so I'm going to pump this up a little bit. Also, if you have nice earphones or earbuds, it's actually a little bit better than trying to just listen off of your speakers if you want to get really clean audio. Now I want to go over the setup of the camera and so the reason why I'm playing that is because my personal voice can be really high pitched, especially when I start speaking. It's like, and it kind of has those pitches to it. If you want, you can start to play around with the kind of cleaning up the audio a little bit in post-production here in Camtasia. So if we go to audio effects, these are all going to be different things. Again, lots of tutorials that are online. I usually will use, for me personally, a combination of clipping reduction, noise reduction, or clicking reduction. I generally don't need to raise the volume because I'm usually really loud. So let's hear it first. Okay, so it's probably going to be a clipping. So I'm just going to drag and drop this. And I'm doing some things wrong on purpose right now. So it sounds a little better. So it kind of like got some of that like taken out a little bit. Let's go ahead and see if it's any better with the noise reduction. So you can either undo. So let's play it without. Just to kind of illustrate some of the points. So let's try noise reduction, see what that does. Then here my home studio also. I don't think that really did much for me. Again, it's kind of like a play around with it, what sounds better to you. So I'm going to delete that effect. I'm just going to try clicking reduction as like a third one to see how that sounds. Known as my living room. I have natural light. I'm not really excited about that one either, so I'm going to delete that. I like the clipping reduction, which is kind of one of my go-tos. We'll try it one more time. Coming from the window right now. This is obviously getting really... So that sounds better to me. Hopefully it sounds better to you. So it just kind of takes some of that like really top bits off a little bit, shaves them off, and kind of like evens it out. So if you wanted to really clean up audio, if you had some really bad audio, I also use Sound Soap. So Sound Soap looks like this. And then this is going to help you also do some really basic audio fixes to your audio files to help bump up the volume if you got really low volume, which happens every once in a while when I'm doing like a live recording far away from the camera. It does like some basic stuff. And if you were to get into the production side of doing Final Cut Pro or getting into the Adobe Suite for audio, then you could do a lot more, but that's going to be beyond the scope of what I am doing on this little mini series here. All right, so I feel pretty happy with it. I know that I did it in one take, and so I'm ready to roll with this. And I'm going to go ahead and export. I'm going to go share. You can either go to export or advanced export. Advanced export just lets you go ahead and do the desktop. Let's call it camera setup. And then at this point, it's going to export to the desktop. And then after that, in terms of workflow, then I would go ahead and transfer it to YouTube. So Camtasia can sometimes save really big files, which is one of the reasons people don't necessarily like it. One of the ways that I kind of deal with that issue is to have an SD card. So once this is done exporting, then especially if I did a lot of edits, I would save the Camtasia file, and that can be really large in terms of file size. So I would usually just put that on my auxiliary drive, which is an SD drive that is in addition to my laptop hard drive. So that's just going to go ahead and cook. It's going to take a little while, so probably like 5-ish minutes. Can take like up to 10 minutes if it was a really big video. So I will just go ahead and leave that cooking and return back for other videos.